I was driving in my car Friday, and I don't know why I turned on the radio, because I don't listen to the radio much anymore now that my dog is dead, but I happened to turn it on, and it was on NPR. And they were interviewing a mayor from a small town outside of Atlanta about the mask ordinances in his state. And I wasn't clear on where it was at first. It took him a long time to get back to who he was, which is really bad journalism. And I saw 3 things in this that make me hate NPR even more, because they're yellow journalists. And that's all there is to it. A couple of years back, Mark Levin started a campaign to defund NPR, which is funny because I work at an educational institution. There is an actual National Public Radio broadcasting station on campus. I worked for NPR when I was in high school. It was at my junior year, I think. I worked for KLVX Channel 10 PBS. It was a very interesting experience, but I think that NPR has outlived its usefulness, and that it has jumped the shark, just like almost all other news networks, if not all of them, from being news to being propaganda. And here's why this interview was so. So they're interviewing this mayor about masks, and there were 3 things that happened in the interview that are evidence of yellow subjective journalism. Number 1, he didn't even pretend to be objective, and you can see that from the way they ask questions, and I'll talk about that. He allowed the mayor, number 2, to draw a poor parallelism and didn't call him out on it because it fed the agenda. Number 3, there was this firm anti-Trump thing going on, and they didn't say his name, and they didn't say I'm anti-Trump, but there was no criticism of anyone but Republicans, as if being a Republican makes you evil and being a Democrat makes you a saint. And if you haven't heard of Krister Stendahl, you should get a hold of the audio or video if you can find it, because it's copyrighted and you can't get it easily, about his conversation about holy envy, where people caricaturize and lionize, and where it evinces that there's an agenda. And that's what this showed, is that there was a definitively clear agenda in the way the interviewer, who he chose too, but I wasn't going to talk about that. I'll put that into the first one. So number 1, no attempt whatsoever at objectivity. Okay, if you are really an objective person and you're doing an interview, then you invite people that are going to offer different perspectives. This guy was doing the interview with his British accent, so he's probably from the BBC or something, only interviews one person, the mayor, which sort of makes sense because the mayor is the one making the decisions and such. But there was no counterpoint, there was no debate, and then rebuttal. There was simply, I ask questions, you answer, and the questions weren't even, there's no attempt to be objective. He says, there's this resistance to wear masks, how do we combat this? And the choice of the word combat clearly evinces a political agenda. An objective response would have been, how do you feel about this? And what do you plan to do? And why is that the decision that you've made? Instead of, well, obviously everyone knows that we need to combat this. We need to force everyone to wear masks. Oh, well, don't pretend you have an agenda or anything. Don't pretend that you're being taxpayer funded to be a propagandist. And that's really why I hate NPR, is it's taxpayer funded propaganda. Okay? Because it implies that when you say the word combat, that it needs to be resisted, that righteously it ought to be resisted, and that anyone who resists is an enemy combatant, or the villain. I'm righteous, you're a villain. Gee, where have we heard that before? Okay? And then there was this anti-freedom, pro-government sentiment that, the people who are doing this, it's because they're anti-government resistance. And they were dismissed and derided for having that. So I just didn't really care much for that. Number 2, the mayor makes this really weak parallelism about wearing masks. He says, well, we have speed limits and litter laws. And I'm like, and people don't violate those? I had a confrontation several years back with 3 federal marshals while I was volunteering with the Forest Service at one of the hikes I do, who littered right in front of me and then insisted that because they were cops, they didn't have to follow the law. And there are tons of people. While I'm driving and listening to NPR, I think I didn't pass a single person, but a lot of people passed me, and I was driving the speed limit, which means they were speeding. And I see cops speed all the time. You probably have. I also watched a woman flick a cigarette butt out the window, and we had 4 fires last week in Las Vegas. 4. None of them were started by cigarettes, but it's like, There's anti-litter laws and anti-speeding laws, and people violate those all the time, and they're not considered to be, menaces to society. So if you're going to make the parallelism that, well, we have laws like this and that, that was pretty weak sauce, because people violate those all the time, and I don't hear the mayor calling it out. Now, it's possible his town is so small that everyone in it doesn't litter and drives the speed limit, but I doubt that, because that is almost impossible that everyone obeys all the laws. The reason why we have laws is because people have already violated the laws, and we've created a law so we can attach a punishment so that justice can claim it and that mercy can be dished out to those who were offended when someone broke themselves against the law. So this dude the interviewer doesn't even call the mayor on, doesn't even point that out. And that was my first response in the car. People break those laws all the time. I'm watching people break the speed limit while I'm listening to him. And he must live in this utopia where, people fart Skittles and burp rainbows, because everyone knows that we have laws that people break all the time. I've got the house next door, and in the last 12 months, there have been at least 5 different squatters in that house. 5 different groups of squatters. It's illegal to break into a house that isn't yours. They've broken the locks. They broke through windows. They just now, this morning, I was over there and someone cut the padlock off the gate. Those are all illegal things. People do them anyway. So making it illegal to go into a store without a mask is not going to stop it, because they cut bolts off. They take stuff. At one point, one of the groups was using my hose for water because that house has no water in it. No water, no power, no gas, no utilities whatsoever. So they were not using my hose to get water, I'm guessing either to drink or to flush the toilet. Because, of course, if you have no water, you can't flush the toilets. Maybe to bathe, I don't know. So I had to modify my hose bib so that they couldn't steal water from me anymore. It is not theirs. But it doesn't stop people from doing it. And I'm not saying that I'm a saint, that I follow all the rules all the time. I look at the speedometer sometimes, same as you, and go, oh, I'm speeding. I better not. And there are things I look at and go, gee. I remember once it took me like 4 hours to return something to a store and have it fixed, because they'd given me the wrong refund for the wrong item. And, it took me like 5 hours of my life to give them $20 back. And I'm like, this is why people don't do the right thing, because when you do the right thing, it costs you more. It costs you more. It fixes it for them, but you have to pay, so people stop doing it. Anyway, enough of that. But the guy didn't even call him out on it. And I was so pissed off at the reporter that he didn't even try to say, And then at the end, the mayor also made some comments about, I wish the governor and the president would get a clue on this. And it's like, the president can't do a damn thing, okay? This is not a presidential, federal level thing. Every state has its own regulations. They're not all the same. They're not uniform. And if the president were to do that, that would be tyrannical. So it's funny that I want the president to be tyrannical, but only in a way that I approve of. And then there was this, we all know they're both morons. And it wasn't spoken that way, because the governor and the president are both Republicans. I'm guessing the mayor is a Democrat, which is why he was invited by this subjective reporter, because the reporter was looking for someone who would spout the rhetoric and support his preconceived notions. Because I tell students all the time in class, most people are not looking for the truth. They are secretly hoping that the truth will corroborate what they already happen to believe. Well, that's propaganda. That's not honesty. It's not integrity. It's not truth. It's not journalism. It's not objective, and I really detested this. So my real thing in this is a really good example about why NPR needs to be privatized. We need to stop giving taxpayer money taken from people who disagree to support things with which they disagree. This goes back to, this is a very American thing, for those of you who don't like this, or who think that I'm, some sort of right-wing wacko. You think back to common sense. When we suffer under a government, things that we expect to suffer without one, our calamity is heightened that we furnish the means by which we suffer. I am sowing the seeds of my own destruction by force of law. But this is a law I can't violate. I know Harry Reid, delusional though he may be, once said before he resigned from the Senate that taxes were optional. Yeah, you give that a whirl and see if the IRS is like, oh, it's fine. This will be fine. It doesn't really matter. Taxes are optional. And try and invoke Harry Reid on that and see how far that gets you. IRS tactics are the best. It's police state tactics, and that's what they really want, is a police state. They all want us to wear these masks outside, not because they help us, but to control us. When I got where I was driving, I got out, and there was somebody outside smoking, and I immediately smelled it through the mask, and I'm like, okay, cigarette smoke goes through, somebody farts, you can smell that. You really think these masks are protecting us from a virus? Because I haven't looked at the actual size of the viral particles yet, but this sieve that we're putting in front of our face and telling ourselves it protects us, if it doesn't protect us from those things, it's not protecting you from COVID-19 either. And so the notion that all you have to do is wear a mask and it'll protect you is farcical. And the reason why this is going to piss me off the most is because I have a family member who was talking to me Friday, and he said, I'm upset because we have other family who are going on vacations, having reunions, they're doing other things, and I'm following the mandates, wearing a mask, staying in my house, and I think he's got corona. And if this person, whose family has followed all this asinine banalities, worn a mask in public, not touched people, not gone out where he wasn't supposed to, and he gets coronavirus, I will be fit to be tied, because this kind of ultra-crepidarianism is exactly what portends to a kakistocracy. And it's what makes people like me angry about propaganda and believe there really is a swamp that needs to be drained. Now, I don't think Trump is doing enough. I think all of them ought to be summarily dismissed. In the words of Barack Obama, it's time to try something new. And by new, I don't mean not Republican. I mean, all these people need to go. 70-year-olds who've been in Congress my whole life, you're not a new idea. You are a new face with old ideas. And if they were going to work, they would have worked a long time ago. So I think the whole swamp needs to be drained. It's time for Washington, D.C., which was literally a swamp and is now figuratively one, to be completely drained once again. The politicians, the bureaucrats, everyone there needs to be fired, sent somewhere else. I mean, it's funny, I remember last year, because I worked for the Forest Service, one of the gals, our new area supervisor, was telling me that, I think it was the Department of Agriculture, had a whole bunch of people quit because the new Secretary of Agriculture said you can either take a transfer and go out to where you actually work, maybe it was a BLM, or you'll be fired. And they didn't want to be transferred from Washington, D.C. in their comfy office to Montana, where they actually, where there's work to be done. So they all need to be removed. Every single one of them. Fire them all, start over from scratch. I think that's the only way we actually get new, is if all the old is clear-cut or burned away. And putting in a new face with the 73-year-old, 73 years of bad habits is not what we need. And I'm not saying I have better ideas. I'm not all that new anymore either. But at least I haven't been in the swamp before, except on vacation. So defund NPR, drain the swamp, and if you're going to be a journalist, at least pretend to be objective, because we weren't born yesterday, and we're tired of it. If you agree with me, I just want you to know you're not alone. If you disagree with me, then thank God that he taught you to be wiser than I am. Godspeed and take care of yourselves, because the government sure as hell won't.